Good evening, all. How are you from London? I am running off about 3 hours sleep today. I had a lot of work to do in my main job, so excuse me if I have a bit of a raspy voice or sound a bit tired. It's been a great day, interesting day as well. Had some good conversations on the phone with my colleagues. It's always nice to hear that they're doing well. And this is all amidst of a lockdown. We're now in a lockdown in the UK because of this coronavirus or COVID-19. So that means we are not allowed out unless it's absolutely essential. And the government said that they will review this in a few weeks. So we're now taking the same stance as a few countries from across the world who have already done this for some time now. So it's some uncertain times, but I am using this opportunity to not only spend time with my family, but also to obviously work from home in my main job and also to deliver this content to you. It's something which I've been very passionate about for a while, personal development, self-development, and more so in the recent months deciding that I need to help more people. I don't help enough people in my current job, and I'm hoping that this content that I'm producing out there will help someone out there who is looking for a bit of inspiration, someone who just needs a spark in their mind, whether it's for a new business idea or to have a conversation with someone. At the moment, obviously this is a review of a business book, but it doesn't mean that the principles in this book are only applied to business. As I said in the previous video, David Steward, he believes in personal values being consistent throughout your life, irrespective of whether it's in business or in your personal life. You shouldn't compromise your values just because you're acting in a business setting. Really, if you're an authentic person, if you're a faithful person, if you want to be seen as someone who is, consistent and is a genuine person, you will not compromise your values just because you're in a different setting. You'll stand up for what's right, and you will not put up with what's wrong. So, without further ado, I'm waffling a bit. Let's jump into chapter 3. Excuse me, which is delegation. As usual, he starts these chapters off with an excerpt from the Bible. This one is Matthew 13:31. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed that someone took and sowed in his field. It is the smallest of all seeds, but when it has grown, it is the greatest of shrubs and becomes a tree. Now, obviously this chapter is about delegation, but it's so interesting how he comes back to this excerpt from the Bible later on in the chapter. He really does a good job of recapping, which I think cements what you've learned and is very useful. So to start off the chapter, he says, and this is verbatim, he says, for instance, while leading his people in the wilderness, a major portion of Moses' day was spent settling disputes among his followers. Observing this, his father-in-law Jethro advised him to delegate. In Exodus 18:17-27, Jethro told Moses to stop wearing himself out by attempting to do everything himself. He suggested that Moses surround himself with able, trustworthy men and appoint them to manage others. These trusted individuals would serve as judges on trivial matters, and only important matters would be presented to Moses. I'll read that bit again. These trusted individuals would serve as judges on trivial matters, and only important matters would be presented to Moses. You are placing too much burden upon yourself by attempting to do everything, Jethro warned. Now, I don't think Moses was the only person guilty of doing this. I think we're all guilty of doing this to some extent. I know I have been guilty of doing this, or was guilty of doing this for most of my life. I just always thought it was a problem to ask for help or to delegate. I used to see it as a sign of weakness, that I wasn't able to finish a task properly, and not even tasks, but just dealing with things. I thought I just had to deal with everything rather than asking someone else to help me, rather than asking someone who's more skilled than I am to get on with something. It took a lot of lessons for me to realize that actually teamwork is essential, and if you want to perform in a high performing environment, or be a high performer in general, there will reach some stages that you have to delegate in order for you to focus on what you need to focus on to get to that next level, or just to complete your task, or just to get through what you're getting through. And there's no shame in delegating at all. Excuse me. So I've made some notes here as well. So delegation is essential to free you up to focus on the most important tasks at hand. He also goes on to say, David Steward, he goes on to say, Jesus delegated to tax collectors and fishermen. Jesus didn't discriminate who he delegated to, whether you were a tax collector or a fisherman or whatever. You stood side by side. He had faith in you, he trusted you, so he would delegate to you because he knew that you were capable of the task that he was asking you to do. So, following on from that point, it's very interesting because this touches on how David recruits and how he makes up his business in terms of people. He says, through the scripture, I have learned to delegate responsibility to individuals based on their attitude, work ethic, and principles. I believe it comes down to trusting the right people, those who have integrity, loyalty, and commitment. I look for these qualities before I place people in leadership roles. While there may be other candidates with better resumes, I listen carefully to what a person receives in his heart. Through conversation, what he is receiving in the gospel comes out. Luke 6:45 says that a good person speaks from the heart, and if we listen carefully, we will pick up on this. So that's very interesting, because what he's saying here is that it doesn't matter if you have all the qualifications in the world. He's looking for a certain type of person, because anyone can study and get those qualifications, but not everyone has those keys to be a good leader or to be a good employee, so to say. Not everyone has the integrity, the loyalty, the commitment, and not everyone can speak from the heart and receive in their hearts. So that was really fascinating to me, because as someone who owns a technology company, you'd expect all of his employees to, be highly qualified individuals who are nerds or whatever. But you know what, maybe they are super intelligent in terms of their qualifications, but that is not the reason that they have been employed solely. It's more to do with their values and how they are as individuals, and that is such a refreshing thing to hear. And I think there's been obviously a lot of talk about this, is whether you need a university degree or whether you need a master's. My take on it is if you need to be a doctor or a dentist or something like that, where it's, you know, you have to reach a certain standard in order for you to be able to perform, then yes, it's important. But I do find there's too much of an emphasis placed on kids just getting degrees for the sake of getting degrees, or being qualified for the sake of being qualified. I don't think careers officers or advisors are sitting down with young people and being like, what do you really want? What do you think you bring to the table? What other skills have you got? Or pointing out for them that would make them unique, and really emphasizing the point of developing their personality as well as developing their education. You can't be really educated but not have a personality, or really educated or not have good values, because sooner or later you'll be busted. You won't be able to function well. People will dislike you if you're super intelligent but you're a bit of a dick to everyone. So moving on, this is a quote from this chapter. David says, "A business person delegates assignments to people, and like the planting of a small mustard seed that becomes a tree and branches out, the work blossoms and multiplies." So if you are hiring people or putting people in power who have these values, then you can delegate to them. And if you trust them, then they will deliver. I think it's more like a two-way thing. Obviously, you're looking for people with those values, but you also want them to know that you trust them with the work that you're giving to them. So if you trust them and they've got good values, then they will be able to delegate to their juniors with the same sort of principles, the same sort of ethics. So you can trust them more to get these things done, these tasks done. Whereas if you're putting people who might be very good academically, but they haven't got those values, and how can you trust them to possibly deliver at all? So it's all about putting the right people in place so that you can let go and let them flourish, and let the people beneath them flourish, so that you can focus on the important business tasks. He goes on to say, entrepreneurs who can't delegate let their egos get in the way, which he calls edgo, edging God out. Now, with entrepreneurs, you might be a startup, so it's just you, or there might be a couple of you, but this is a trap that we all hear about. If you're interested in business, you hear entrepreneurs who set up a business and they do everything. There's nothing wrong with doing everything, but as soon as you can afford to, you should really look at delegating the mundane or repetitive tasks or your weaknesses out to people, so that you can focus on the more important business activities as an entrepreneur, which is really bringing in business and just getting liquid and getting that money coming in. Whereas if you're focusing on absolutely everything, you can't be great. It's impossible. You can only do that for so long before burning out. That's why you have so many small businesses where it's just one owner for years and years and years. They just can't delegate, and David Steward believes this is because of ego. You think you can do it better than everyone else can do it, but if you have that attitude, then how can you possibly expect to grow? Because you might bring someone in and they will see that you don't trust them to do the work, and you won't give them that responsibility. They won't be able to get promoted, and eventually they'll leave. So it's not just about delegating everything out, but it's just about realizing that as a small business owner, if you want it to scale, then there'll be a time when you'll have to bring people in in order for you to scale and to free up your time so that you can focus on other activities. And it's quite interesting, he says, edging God out. As we've already seen in the previous chapters, he's a very spiritual person, and he believes, David believes he's doing God's work. So if he were to let his ego be at the forefront of his decision making, like we've just discussed, then that's what he means by edging God out. Whereas if he stands back and lets God not make the decisions, but influence his decisions, and if he, refers to the Bible and refers to his faith as a backdrop for making decisions, then it allows him to trust other people, and it allows him to find the right people to bring into the business. Whereas if you have the opposite approach, he believes that you're edging God out, you're relying on your abilities as a human being rather than relying on God's infinite wisdom to help guide your business and guide your endeavors, not just in business, really, just in life. So that's it in terms of my notes. There are a couple of other good quotes in here. Let's see. This is one I like. Better to let go and let God. To grow a business, you can't let false pride govern you. As Proverbs 16:18 says, pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. So at least my interpretation of this is, if you show too much pride, you don't ask for help, you think you know everything, then on the other side of that, as Proverbs 16:18 says, is a fall. You're just going to end up making catastrophic mistakes, or there'll be a lot of self-sabotage, and you won't really receive the blessings which God has intended for you. Lastly, going on to the last page, David Steward believes in surrounding himself with experts. He's running $1 billion business, so he can't do everything. And he brings in people who know more than him because he realizes his limits as a human being. He can't possibly know everything better than everyone else. So, as he says here, this requires me to have explicit trust in these individuals because I must rely on them to operate their own organizations within the company. So he relies on each and every person to perform, and he brings people in who he can trust to perform. It doesn't mean that he lets them get on with it completely, because later on in this paragraph he says that they have weekly finance meetings to review every department of the company. So he is very much keeping his finger on the pulse, and that's a very good point for him to end the chapter on, because what he's saying throughout this chapter is, yes, it's very important to delegate, it's essential, but it doesn't mean that you delegate blindly and allow people to run your business into the ground. You delegate, you trust them, but you also obviously check up and make sure that they're heading in the right direction, because you as the business owner or even manager, you're helping to steer that ship, and you need to make sure that all of your colleagues are on board, going in the same direction and doing what's needed to keep that ship going. So I hope you like this review of this chapter. Tomorrow we are going on to chapter 4, which is striving for excellence, and this looks like a good chapter. I actually haven't made notes on this, so I better shoot off soon and make some notes. But as ever, if you do like the videos, then please like and subscribe. If you don't like it, then dislike it, and if you're feeling generous, then let me know why. and I'm always open to hearing other people's interpretations or opinions on what I've done. You know, it'd be nice to get a few people commenting so that we can bounce ideas off each other. And again, you know, yes, this is a book based on biblical principles, but try not to feel marginalized by it. You can always learn from things that you are not familiar with. So keep an open mind is what I would say. And if you have any suggestions of books that you'd like me to go through, then please let me know. Okay, have a great evening all and take care.